Lesson 16. Mary had a little lamb. Listen to the tape, then answer the question below. Was Dmitri right to apologize to his neighbor? Why not? Mary and her husband Dmitri lived in the tiny village of Perachora in southern Greece. One of Mary's prized possessions was a little white lamb which her husband had given her. She kept it tied to a tree in a field during the day and went to fetch it every evening. One evening, however, the lamb was missing. The rope had been cut, so it was obvious that the lamb had been stolen. When Dmitri came in from the fields, his wife told him what had happened. Dmitri at once set out to find the thief. He knew it would not prove difficult in such a small village. After telling several of his friends about the theft, Dmitri found out that his neighbor, Aleko, had suddenly acquired a new lamb. Dmitri immediately went to Aleko's house and angrily accused him of stealing the lamb. He told him he had better return it or he would call the police. Aleko denied taking it and led Dmitri into his backyard. It was true that he had just bought a lamb, he explained, but his lamb was black. Ashamed of having acted so rashly, Dmitri apologized to Aleko for having accused him. While they were talking, it began to rain, and Dmitri stayed in Aleko's house until the rain stopped. When he went outside, half an hour later, he was astonished to find that the little black lamb was almost white. Its wool, which had been dyed black, had been washed clean by the rain.
Lesson 17. The longest suspension bridge in the world. Listen to the tape, then answer the question below. How is the bridge supported? Verrazzano, an Italian about whom little is known, sailed into New York Harbor in 1524 and named it Angoulême. He described it as a very agreeable situation located within two small hills in the midst of which flowed a great river. Though Verrazzano is by no means considered to be a great explorer, his name will probably remain immortal, for on November 21st, 1964, the longest suspension bridge in the world was named after him. The Verrazzano Bridge, which was designed by Othmar Ammann, joins Brooklyn to Staten Island. It has a span of 4,260 feet. The bridge is so long that the shape of the earth had to be taken into account by its designer. Two great towers support 4 huge cables. The towers are built on immense underwater platforms made of steel and concrete. The platforms extend to a depth of over 100 feet under the sea. These alone took 16 months to build. Above the surface of the water, the towers rise to a height of nearly 700 feet. They support the cables from which the bridge has been suspended. Each of the 4 cables contains 26,108 lengths of wire. It has been estimated that if the bridge were packed with cars, it would still only be carrying a third of its total capacity. However, size and strength are not the only important things about this bridge. Despite its immensity, it is both simple and elegant, fulfilling its designer's dream to create an enormous object drawn as faintly as possible. Lesson 18. Electric currents in modern art. Listen to the tape, Then answer the question below. How might some of the exhibits have been dangerous? Modern sculpture rarely surprises us anymore. The idea that modern art can only be seen in museums is mistaken. Even people who take no interest in art cannot have failed to notice examples of modern sculpture on display in public places. Strange forms stand in gardens and outside buildings and shops. We have got quite used to them. Some so-called modern pieces have been on display for nearly 80 years. In spite of this, some people, including myself, were surprised by a recent exhibition of modern sculpture. The first thing I saw when I entered the art gallery was a notice which said, "Do not touch the exhibits. Some of them are dangerous." The objects on display were pieces of moving sculpture. Oddly shaped forms that are suspended from the ceiling and move in response to a gust of wind are quite familiar to everybody. These objects, however, were different. Lined up against the wall, there were long, thin wires attached to metal spheres. The spheres had been magnetized and attracted or repelled each other all the time. In the center of the hall, there were a number of tall structures which contained colored lights. These lights flickered continuously, like traffic lights which have gone mad. Sparks were emitted from small black boxes, and red lamps flashed on and off angrily. It was rather like an exhibition of prehistoric electronic equipment. These peculiar forms not only seemed designed to shock people emotionally, but to give them electric shocks as well. Lesson 19. A very dear cat. Listen to the tape, then answer the question below. Why was Rastus very dear in more ways than one? Kidnappers are rarely interested in animals, but they recently took considerable interest in Mrs. Eleanor Ramsey's cat. Mrs. Eleanor Ramsey, a very wealthy old lady, has shared a flat with her cat, Rastus, for a great many years. Rastus leads an orderly life. He usually takes a short walk in the evenings and is always home by 7 o'clock. One evening, however, he failed to arrive. Mrs. Ramsey got very worried. She looked everywhere for him but could not find him. 3 days after Rastus's disappearance, Mrs. Ramsey received an anonymous letter. The writer stated that Rastus was in safe hands and would be returned immediately if Mrs. Ramsey paid a ransom of £1,000. Mrs. Ramsey was instructed to place the money in a cardboard box and to leave it outside her door. At first, she decided to go to the police, but fearing that she would never see Rastus again, the letter had made that quite clear, she changed her mind. She withdrew £1,000 from her bank and followed the kidnapper's instructions. The next morning, the box had disappeared, but Mrs. Ramsey was sure that the kidnapper would keep his word. Sure enough, Rastus arrived punctually at 7 o'clock that evening. He looked very well, though he was rather thirsty, for he drank half a bottle of milk. The police were astounded when Mrs. Ramsey told them what she had done. She explained that Rastus was very dear to her. Considering the amount she paid, he was dear in more ways than one.
Lesson 20. Pioneer Pilots. Listen to the tape, then answer the question below. What was the name of the first plane to fly across the English Channel? In 1908, Lord Northcliffe offered a prize of £1,000 to the first man who would fly across the English Channel. Over a year passed before the first attempt was made. On July 19, 1909, in the early morning, Hubert Latham took off from the French coast in his plane, the Antoinette IV. He had traveled only 7 miles across the channel when his engine failed and he was forced to land on the sea. The Antoinette floated on the water until Latham was picked up by a ship. 2 days later, Louis Blériot arrived near Calais with a plane called No. 11. Blériot had been making planes since 1905, and this was his latest model. A week before, he had completed a successful overland flight during which he covered 26 miles. Latham, however, did not give up easily. He, too, arrived near Calais on the same day with a new Antoinette. It looked as if there would be an exciting race across the channel. Both planes were going to take off on July 25th, but Latham failed to get up early enough. After making a short test flight at 4:15 a.m., Blériot set off half an hour later. His great flight lasted 37 minutes. When he landed near Dover, the first person to greet him was a local policeman. Latham made another attempt a week later and got within half a mile of Dover, but he was unlucky again. His engine failed, and he landed on the sea for the second time.